I recently had a client who competed in our first HYROX event. And since HYROX is continuing to grow in popularity across the world, but it's also becoming more accessible to people here in America since it started in Europe. So I wanted to walk through what her prep for the event actually looked like. And I also wanted to expand upon this a bit and kind of walk through how I think preparing for a HYROX event would look like for someone who maybe it's their first time, and then also for someone who has done events before and they're looking to improve upon their time. How might they go about that? So today, let's talk about training for HYROX. The fitness movement is brought to you by Zor Fitness. We offer coaching and individualized program design, as well as educational content for coaches and athletes. It's all at one place, zorfitness.com. So first of all, what is HYROX? I kind of have described it before as a combination between like CrossFit and a Spartan race, right? Basically, you're doing a hybrid style event. I think their website calls it like exercise racing, which is often actually how I describe CrossFit, which is kind of funny. But it's basically you have a 1K run and then a station that you can complete, and you have 8 rounds of that, and the entire thing is 4 times. So most of like the world record time is like just under 1 hour for both men and women right now. So it's like most people are well over an hour to complete this type of event. So it would be a 1K run, then 1,000 meters on the ski erg, 1K run, then a 50-meter sled push, 1K run, 50-meter sled pull, 1K run, 80-meter burpee broad jump, 1K row, 1,000 meters on the row erg, 1K run, 200-meter farmer's carry, 1K run, 100 meters of sandbag lunges, and finally 1K run and 100, or depending on the division, maybe 75 wall balls. So my client who was doing the event we've been working together for a while, and she is primarily a CrossFit athlete and someone who's based out of Europe. So when she kind of brought this to me as a possibility, I thought it was like a good opportunity for her because it's something that she already kind of lends herself naturally to as an athlete. So I thought it could be a good mix. And she came to me and it was about 12-ish weeks away from the actual competition date. I think it might have been just over that by the time I actually started the prep. I think we had basically like 3 training cycles essentially. So like 12 4-week blocks. So for her, it was a nice amount of time where it didn't detract too much from her goals in CrossFit because she still wants to continue to do that. However, it was also enough time where it gave us an opportunity to slowly build up that volume and while also keeping the intensity of those bouts of work around race pace. It allowed us to mimic that and do that kind of in a more appropriate fashion where it's really easy for people who have signed up for a race to get really excited about it and then increase volume while also trying to mimic the race pace intensities and like do all their stations and hold their splits as they would normally would. And that can obviously lead to a lot of issues for athletes, mainly overuse type stuff or just like not recovering well from the work they're actually putting in. Because obviously if you're putting good quality work in, you want to get good adaptations out, and it doesn't always work that way if you're not recovering effectively. So for her, I thought we did a really good job of balancing, pushing her, trying to get good adaptation, but also being realistic, like, hey, you are 35, 40 years old. You're only going to get so much adaptation out of your system in the next 8 to 12 weeks. We need to be realistic with that and prioritize you staying healthy and having actually good quality when you actually go to practice these things. So for me as the coach, the first thing that I did was build out a skeleton for her training. And often when I'm writing someone's training, the skeleton that I'm using, the template that I'm using and building their training off of is usually single week, meaning that it is, a 5-6 day template. And I'm just going to progress their training off of that single week each time. And that allows really cleanly to build in a lot of linear progressions. However, for her, I opted to do a biweekly template, really just because now we have 2 weeks to play with and it allows you to fit more unique touches of different types of movements. Obviously, HYROX is a known event, is the exact same thing every single time, unlike CrossFit. However, that's really helpful to be able to say like, okay, these are the things that we know that we can actually work on and push at. And these are the things that are sort of our high leverage handles to pull on over the next 12 weeks. So essentially we ran a 12-week cycle with keeping roughly the same progressions throughout the entire thing, obviously tweaking them and having that A and B week, which allowed her to kind of stay mentally engaged and physically and mentally ready and able to attack each session that she came back to. And it was always nice. That's like a good way to keep things fresh and to vary the take that the athlete's actually getting while also like keeping in their same priorities. And I thought it executed really, really nicely for her. So this is what I landed on as we kind of built up to her event. The A week was session 1. Each of these weeks has 3 sessions that we dedicated specifically to HYROX for her. Okay, session 1, week 1, it was basically we started on the ergs, accumulating a little bit of volume there. Again, in this event, we have the row erg and we have the ski erg, so that's what we spent our time on. And then we had run intervals as the main piece of the day. And these were, we started actually giving her a 10K run time trial as like a test retest as a very close proxy, because obviously running is an extremely important part of HYROX. And if there's one thing that if people are coming from some other discipline, especially like CrossFit, just increasing the run exposures and getting that fitness up to the highest level possible is going to be extremely important. So that's obviously what you're going to see here is one of the biggest priorities. And stations are something where, especially if you're coming from a CrossFit type background or something where you've done some strength training before, the actual strength component of that probably won't be nearly as much of the issue as it is maybe systemic fatigue or a local endurance limitation. So starting on the ergs, getting warm, doing run intervals, and this was often after we did that initial 10K run time trial, it was much more like slower run, faster run, and then like a short walk recovery. And then like multiple rounds of that where we're getting probably in the like 35 to like 50-minute range for a lot of her run stuff. And then back onto the ergs as a more of an aerobic dose, but then also like a way to like flush and cool things down. So that was day 1, week 1. Day 2 of week 1, we did a bunch of like supporting strength on this day. So multiple patterns. And mainly what I mean is like we got some hinging, some pulling, some squatting, some pressing, right? All of the main fundamental patterns that you're going to need. So we did more so like in the 8 to 10 rep range. I wouldn't call that hypertrophy. Again, it was more so like moderate, loading, making sure that she's just kind of keeping a touch on those patterns just as it sounds. And then after that was station work that was more like just accumulating some good volume in those things, getting exposures to that if you haven't had those specific moves before. Like a lot of my athletes have done, burpees or sled pushes or things like that before, but getting it in the format that you're actually going to see it is super important. And slowly increasing the volume, and that allows for the athlete to basically get more practice of it. That's is essentially the easiest way to think about it, right? You're getting more opportunities to refine that pattern. And then day 3 would be her long run day. Again, typically like somewhere around zone 2 or just like a comfortable pace where she could probably keep that entirely nose breathing nasal throughout. And it was just kind of easy and accumulation work for her. And then week 2, day 1, we did some specific prep work for her that was like related to some of the joints that she was having that we just basically wanted to keep fresh and not having that overused stuff pop up. So just some prep work for that. And then we had some intervals, multiple intervals. So it was often like 3 sets of, running immediately into a station and then rest. So for example, it might've been like, and actually go over example here later on, but it was like run, 300-meter run at your estimated pace right into maybe 20 meters of burpee broad jumps. Rest 1 to 2 minutes and then repeat that like 3 times. And then basically like 4 or 5 of those different types of station work. So run right into a station, rest a bit, and repeat. That way you can keep the quality high in terms of your work rate, right around race pace, but then keeping the effort relatively low. And then day 2 on that B week was push, pull, and lunge. Like, again, I would call this more like strength accessory. It wasn't true strength work. And then having a threshold run after that. So a continuous run at a pretty tough pace, getting used to having the heart rate and the breathing elevated, the legs burning a little bit, and being able to sustain your pace while moving through that and continuing to move at a high rate. And then finally, day 3 on week 2 was again more of a longer aerobic day. In this case, it was blended cyclical, so it was like a rotating EMOM. Like minute 1, it'd have to be like ski erg, row, and then run. Or as we went on, it was also starting to incorporate some of the stations, so we might have like a farmer's carry at like a moderate weight on the one day, for example. And that's what we ran her through. And after talking with her after the event and kind of debriefing a bit, I feel like overall we did a lot of things really well. I actually took her program and I modified it and tweaked some things that I thought would make it more appropriate for a bigger demographic of people. And I'm actually offering it now on the website. So if people are interested, you can check it out. I will link to it in both the show notes of the podcast as well as the comments on YouTube. So basically, I reworked some of the things in it where this was obviously written for an individual design athlete, and that's the majority of who I work with. However, I kind of expanded it where now we can have it as an online format and have it available to more people, and it's going to also be, again, more appropriate for a larger demographic of person. And I also condensed it down to 8 weeks since I feel like that's just more an accessible timeline for a lot of people as they go about this. Again, 3 days per week. So I wanted to go through a few of the samples from this actual program, as well as like these were things that essentially like I gave her variations of this type of thing, but this is actually pulled directly from the program. People, again, are interested in it. So this is an example of one of the long runs. Again, I mentioned this was week 1, session 3 that you're often going to see this as. Starting off with prep work, 3 rounds, 5 cook hip lift per side, 10 jumping jacks, 5 bootstrappers, 10 jumping jacks, 3 rounds through that. And then we go through our run prep routine through Zor Fitness, 50-minute run at a comfortable pace, followed by a 2-minute couch stretch per side. So relatively simple, but it gives you some specifics around warm up and cool down and things like that. Another example, this was a strength and station capacity day, the one I mentioned. Starting off 10-minute skier, got a warm up pace, into 3 to 4 rounds, 20 lateral line hops, 8 seal push-ups, 8 alternating scorpions, and 8 squatting sky reaches. And then we actually go into the strength work. That was just prep work. Barbell RDO, 3 sets of 8 reps, RPE 8 to 9. Barbell back rack reverse lunge, 3x12, RPE 7, so a little bit on the lighter side. Pull-ups, 3 sets of 6 to 8 reps. People should be weighting and assisting those to make it kind of appropriately challenging to put it in like that RPE 7 to 8 range. And then barbell bench press, 3 by 8 to 10, RPE 8 to 9. So the strength work, you can see it was hinge, lunge, pull, press. So again, hitting basically all the major patterns there. And then 4 rounds for quality. This is like that station capacity kind of volume building work that I was talking about. Rest a good recovery between all of the elements. 25-meter sled push, 25-meter sled pull, 20-meter burpee broad jump. And then again, into 4 more rounds for quality. Again, resting between all the stations as needed to have good quality. 80-meter farmer's carry, 15-meter sandbag lunge, 15 wall balls. Followed by some stretching, frog stretch, glute med stretch, lizard stretch, elevated Achilles stretch with some specifics around that. So that was our second example. And the third example was intervals. And this was the one that was basically running and then into another movement, one of the station movements. Starting off was the warm-up, 10 rounds at a warm-up pace, 30-second run, 30-second walk. And then for the actual run plus the station, these sets that I'm talking about, I have a note that says the goal is to complete each set slightly faster than your projected race pace. So here's the workout. 2 sets, resting 2 minutes after each, 400-meter run, 20 burpee broad jump. And then right into 2 sets, rest 2 minutes between, 400-meter run, 80-meter farmer's carry. Immediately into 2 sets, 400-meter run, 40-meter sled push. Immediately into 2 sets, resting 2 minutes between, 400-meter run, 40-meter sled pull. Immediately into 2 sets, rest 2 minutes between, 400-meter run, 20 wall balls. And then some cool down work, walking with the breath sync and some foam rolling after that. So there you have it. There were 3 sample days. I don't want to give away all my secrets just yet, but again, I will link to the program if people are interested in it. Again, on the YouTube, I'll put it in the comments. On the podcast, I will put it in the show notes. So if people use the code TFM20, I'll give them $20 off. The Fitness Movement 20. Use that code, it'll get you $20 off the program. Lastly, I will leave you guys with this piece of advice. If you're prepping for your first event, I think this is an easy trap to fall into. My recommendation would be to be really careful with your training volume. Don't increase it more than maybe 15 to 20% week over week. Okay, no more than that. 20% being on the high end. If you go more than that 20%, it's a really easy way to put yourself in a recovery deficit where basically none of your workouts are going to be high quality and you're way more likely to deal with overuse injuries leading up to the actual event. Chronic stuff that you're not just going to be able to clear up in a few days with a taper. So you need to respect your current ability levels as you prep for the event and be realistic about how much you can actually change and push adaptation into your system over a 2-month period, an 8-week block, something like that. You can really overestimate how much you can actually progress in that amount of time. The goal should be to go into the event and be healthy and feeling fresh and having your actual body be ready to take on an event like that. Lastly, pull back that volume and intensity quite a bit in that last week leading up to the event to clear up any lingering fatigue and allow you to actually have your peak fitness expression when you actually go to the event. So that is my recommendation for athletes training for HYROX. Thanks for listening today. If you're someone who just started listening to the show, I would encourage you to subscribe so you can stay up to date. If you're someone who's been listening for a while, I would encourage you to rate and review the show. And lastly, the best thing that you can do to support our work is also the best thing that you can do for your performance. And that is by hiring one of our coaches. Until next time, stay the course.